Welcome to our fun little study group for PP 5361 Theory and Management of Public Service Organizations. These are the readings from the required text, Managing Human Behavior in Public and Nonprofit Organizations, Chapter 14.
It is genuinely good to be back. And I have to say, this is the session I've been looking forward to the most. This is really the big one.
Really? Because I have to admit, and I suspect a few people listening might feel the exact same way, when I first looked at the syllabus and saw the title for Chapter 14, Managing Behavior of the Public Interest, I kind of groaned.
A groan. That's a bit of a harsh reaction to the finale, isn't it?
Well, think about it, though. It just sounds like one of those generic wrap-up chapters, right? You know the kind. The textbook authors are tired, the semester's winding down, so they just throw in a chapter that says, go forth and be good people, and we all just high five and leave. It usually feels like filler.
I get that. It definitely has that ring to it on the surface. Public interest is such a big, vague term. But if you actually, get into the text, which I know you did, you realize pretty quickly that this is not a throwaway conclusion.
Not at all.
It's actually the philosophical core of the entire course. It's the destination we've been heading towards all along.
Oh, absolutely. Once I got past that title, I realized it's not a wrap-up. It's the anchor. It stops asking, how do we manage? Which is what we've been obsessing over for 13 chapters.
Yeah.
And it starts asking, why are we managing? And maybe more importantly, who are we managing for?
Exactly. It poses the big question that, frankly, a lot of management books just skip over because it's messy. And that question is, how do we manage ourselves and how do we influence others in a way that is consistent with democratic governance?
Right. And that's the key phrase, not just efficient governance, not just effective governance, but democratic governance.
And right out of the gate, to make sure we know they aren't messing around, the text hits us with some pretty heavy hitters to set the tone.
Yeah, they do. I mean, they open with John F. Kennedy saying, let the public service be a proud and noble profession. And then they immediately follow it up with Barack Obama.
And that Obama quote is powerful.
Mm-hmm.
We lose ourselves when we compromise the very ideals that we fight to defend.
That one gave me chills a little bit.
Yeah.
Because it frames the whole discussion not as, how to process paperwork faster, but as a moral struggle. It's saying if we compromise our democratic ideals just for the sake of expediency, we've already lost the plot.
And that is the central tension we are going to explore in this deep dive. It's that constant pull between getting things done, efficiency, speed, metrics, all the things we usually get graded on, and doing things the right way.
The democratic way.
Yes, which in a democracy means doing them fairly, equitably, and inclusively, even if it's slower, even if it's harder.
So, okay, our mission today is to really unpack that tension. The chapter breaks it down into 3 big buckets. We've got inclusion and diversity, then ethics and accountability, and the big one, the one that's really the main event, the definition of the new public service.
And that definition of new public service, or NPS, is really where we need to spend the bulk of our time. Because it's a direct counterargument to the way we've been told government should run for the last, 30 or 40 years.
Okay, so let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because I think to really understand the hero of our story here, new public service, we have to first understand the antagonist. And the antagonist is an idea that I think if you stop someone on the street, most people would actually agree with it.
Mm-hmm.
They'd probably say, yeah, that sounds great. Why aren't we doing that?
And which idea is that?
The idea that we should just run government like a business.
Yes. The old classic. The business model of government. In the academic terms the text uses, this is what they call new public management, or just NPM for short.
NPM. And it sounds so good, doesn't it? It sounds efficient. It sounds modern. I mean, let's be honest. If I'm at the DMV and I'm standing in a line that hasn't moved in 20 minutes, I'm standing there thinking, I really wish this place ran like an Amazon fulfillment center.
I think we've all had that thought.
You want speed, accuracy, customer obsession. So why is that idea running government like a business viewed as the antagonist in this chapter?
Well, let's look at what NPM actually values, according to the text. It explains that new public management focuses really heavily on market mechanisms.
Okay, what does that mean in plain English?
It means competition. It means treating agencies like they're competing for market share. It views the administrator, the public manager, as an entrepreneur who needs to hustle and find efficiencies. And most importantly, it views the citizen as a customer.
And the goal there is strictly the bottom line, right? Streamlining, maybe privatization, cutting costs, getting the most bang for your buck.
Precisely. And we have to be fair here. The text is very clear that this approach isn't evil. It's not trying to set up a straw man. It explicitly acknowledges that NPM has brought some positive changes in some areas.
Right. I mean, nobody wants a wasteful government. We all want the potholes fixed and the budget balanced.
Yeah.
We don't want our tax dollars disappearing into some bureaucratic black hole.
Of course not. And NPM did improve financial discipline in a lot of places. It cut some bloat, and it forced agencies to actually start measuring their performance, which wasn't always happening before.
There's a big but coming. I can feel it.
There's a huge but. And this is where it gets really fascinating. The text argues that while NPM is good at creating efficiency, it is an incomplete model when you apply it to a democracy.
Incomplete. I like that word. Just missing something.
It's missing the whole point, really. If you run a democracy solely like a business, you miss the purpose of democracy itself.
Because the goal of a business is profit, but the goal of a democracy is what? Community, justice, something bigger.
Exactly that. A business exists to maximize return for its shareholders. A government exists to ensure justice, liberty, and the general welfare for its citizens. Those are completely different scoreboards.
Right.
And this brings us to the alternative that's presented by Denhart and Denhart in the text. They call it the New Public Service, or NPS. Their core argument is that public service cannot and should not be based solely on business values. It has to be grounded in the principles of democratic governance.
I really love that distinction. It's like saying, sure, a fast food restaurant is incredibly efficient at getting me a burger in 90 seconds, but I absolutely do not want my local court system to be a fast food restaurant.
That is a perfect analogy.
I want it to be fair. I want it to be deliberative, even if fairness takes a lot longer.
Yes. In a business, efficiency is often the top, or maybe even the only, metric that truly matters. But in the public sector, things like justice, fairness, and equity matter just as much, if not more. You cannot maximize community the same way you maximize profit. You can't just, cut the unprofitable citizens from your service area.
Okay, so this is the core conflict. NPM versus NPS. Business versus democracy. And Denhart, they lay out what they call the 7 tenets of the new public service. This really feels like the meat of the chapter. If you're studying for the exam, this is the study guide right here.
It absolutely is. These 7 tenets, they act as a corrective lens. They take these common, almost common sense assumptions about management, the kinds of things you hear on LinkedIn or in MBA programs, and they flip them to align with democratic values instead of market values.
All right, let's dive in. Let's get into the weeds with tenet number 1. And this one is very catchy. Serve rather than steer.
Serve rather than steer.
Yeah.
Now, this is a direct response to an old phrase from the 90s, particularly from the book Reinventing Government, which famously said government should steer, not row.
I remember that. The idea was that government should set the direction, it steers the ship, but it should privatize the actual work. It hires contractors to do the rowing.
Exactly. But new public service comes along and says, wait a minute, we shouldn't even be steering.
That sounds, I don't know, passive. If the government isn't steering the ship, then who is? Are we just supposed to be drifting in the ocean?
Well, it only sounds passive if you think of the government as this solitary captain of the ship, barking orders from the bridge. But the text points out that the world today is just way too complex for that model.
How so?
Think about any major public policy issue. Climate change, healthcare. It's not just one government agency in charge. Policies today are this incredibly complex mix of strict regulations, nonprofits doing work on the ground, community groups, private contractors, even international bodies. No single entity actually has their hand on the wheel.
So the administrator isn't Captain Picard on the bridge of the Enterprise giving orders anymore?
No, not even close. The administrator's job now under this NPS model is to mediate, to negotiate, and to broker solutions among all these different groups. The text says the key shift is moving from this idea of government controls the decision to government fosters participation.
So instead of being the one who's steering the car, you're the one who's organizing the carpool.
Yes.
You're getting everyone in the room to first figure out where we're all going together.
That is a brilliant way to put it. You are facilitating the dialogue that decides the destination. You aren't forcing the destination on the passengers. You are the convener, the connector. You serve the process of decision-making rather than dictating the decision itself.
That is a huge mind shift for a manager. And it leads perfectly into tenet number 2. The public interest is the aim, not the byproduct.
This is a really deep philosophical point. In market-based economics, we often just assume that the public interest is, the sum total of everyone's individual self-interest.
Right. Adam Smith's invisible hand. The theory is that if everyone just buys the car they want and eats the food they want and pursues their own goals, the market will magically balance itself out. And that final balance is the public good.
Exactly. That's what the text calls the aggregation of self-interest. It assumes that if I do what's best for me and you do what's best for you, and we multiply that by 330 million people, the math will just work out for society as a whole.
But New Public Service argues that's not how it works.
Not at all. It argues that the public interest is something distinct. It's not just a mathematical average of what we all want individually. It's something that we have to consciously build together.
So we don't arrive at the public interest just by adding up a bunch of votes or dollars in a spreadsheet.
No, we get there through dialogue. We have to build a collective, shared notion of what our interest is. The text explicitly says administrators must create arenas for citizens to actually talk to each other, not just to vote in isolation every couple of years.
It sounds like the difference between everyone in a family ordering their own separate takeout versus sitting down together to decide what to cook for dinner.
That's it. It's the difference between asking what's good for me and asking what's good for us.
And that us is the key.
It's everything. Because if I only pursue what is good for me, I might not care about the school across town because I don't have kids or my kids are grown. But if we engage in a real deliberative dialogue, the kind of process this model calls for, I might come to realize that a better school across town actually makes the whole city safer, more prosperous, and raises my property values.
But you only get there if the process is designed to help you see that bigger picture.
Yes. You have to be pushed out of your silo. So the manager's job, in this view, is to create that process, to help us see the us, to force us out of our little bubbles of self-interest.
So the aim is that shared vision. The public interest is the goal you're aiming for from the start, not just what happens by accident after everyone fights for their own piece of the pie.
Precisely.
Okay, moving on to tenet number 3. Think strategically, act democratically.
This one sounds a little bit like a corporate slogan, but the act democratically part is really the key. The concept is that you, as a public manager, simply cannot solve complex problems alone.
I feel like this connects right back to that serve rather than steer point we just talked about.
Yeah.
If you can't solve it alone, you have no choice but to collaborate.
It goes even deeper than just collaboration between, say, the Department of Transportation and the Parks Department. It's about collaborating with the citizens themselves. And the text makes a really fascinating point here.
What's that?
It says that when citizens are involved in implementing programs, not just passively receiving them as services, it creates a sense of civic pride and responsibility. It builds social capital.
Can you give me an example of that? What does it actually look like for a citizen to help implement a program? I'm picturing, just volunteering.
Volunteering is part of it, but it's more structured. So think about a neighborhood safety program. The strategic but non-democratic way, the NPM way, would be for the police department to analyze the data, decide what's best, and then simply put up more cameras and increase patrols.
Okay. They are delivering safety to their customers. They're saying, we are the experts. Here is your product. Safety.
Right. And it's a very transactional relationship. I pay my taxes, you protect me. But to act democratically, as the NPS model suggests, would be to organize a neighborhood watch, hold community meetings where neighbors get to define what safety even means to them.
So for one neighborhood, it might mean slowing down traffic. For another, it might mean more streetlights.
Exactly. And maybe then they volunteer to monitor safe walking routes for kids going to school. Now, the citizens aren't just consumers of safety, they are producers of safety. They have skin in the game.
And that builds the community fabric in a way that just having a patrol car drive by every hour never, ever could. It implies that I have a role to play in my own governance.
Yeah.
I'm not just a spectator.
You're a partner. It changes the entire relationship from provider and receiver to partners in a shared endeavor. It says, we are all in this together, rather than, don't worry, the government will fix it for you.
Which brings us to what I think is the most controversial one, at least for me personally. Tenet number 4. Serve citizens, not customers.
Ah, yes. This is the big one. This is really the central conflict between the business model and the democratic model, all wrapped up in 2 words.
I have to play devil's advocate here for a minute. What is so wrong with customer service? I love good customer service. I want the government to treat me like a valued customer. I want them to be polite, fast, and responsive. Why on earth does the text say customer is a bad word?
And this is such an important question. It's not that being polite or responsive is bad. Of course not. Those are great traits. Public servants should absolutely be responsive and respectful. The problem isn't the behavior, it's the underlying psychology of the customer relationship versus the citizen relationship.
Okay, break that down for me. What's the psychological difference?
The text makes a really crucial distinction here. It says that customers focus on their short-term self-interest and their own immediate satisfaction. The mindset is transactional. I paid my taxes. Where is my service?
Right. I ordered the steak, bring me the steak. And if the steak is cold, I send it back and write a bad one-star review on Yelp.
Exactly. Citizens, on the other hand, are asked to assume a degree of personal responsibility for the community and to look at the long term. A customer wants low taxes and high services, which, by the way, is a mathematical impossibility.
Yeah, that math doesn't work out.
A citizen, however, understands that high-quality services require funding and might vote to tax themselves for a new library or a bridge that they might not personally use every single day because they understand it benefits the entire community.
Wow, that is a massive shift in mindset. A customer complains, a citizen contributes, a customer consumes, a citizen co-creates.
It is. And the implication for the government manager is just huge. If you view the public as customers, your job is to satisfy their immediate and often selfish desires. And that leads to really bad public policy. It leads to short-termism. It encourages people to constantly ask, what can I get from the system, rather than what can I give to the system?
Right. It leads to, eating the seed corn because the customer is hungry now.
That's a great way to put it. But if you serve them as citizens, you can focus on these higher order values: justice, fairness, equity, the broader good. The text says government should not just respond to selfish, short-term desires like a business trying to maximize sales. It has a higher calling. It has to educate and engage, not just placate.
So in a strange way, treating someone like a citizen is actually more respectful than treating them like a customer. Because you're treating them like an adult who can understand complex trade-offs and has a responsibility to the whole.
I think that's a beautiful way to put it. You are inviting them into the difficult process of governance, not just the easy process of consumption.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's move to tenet number 5. Accountability is not simple.
This is a tough one for people who love their spreadsheets and their dashboards with all the green and red lights.
Because in business, accountability is sold as being pretty simple, right? Did you make money? Yes or no? If the line on the chart is black, you're good. If it's red, you're in trouble. The market is seen as this ruthless but clear judge.
It's a bit of an oversimplification, but yeah, at the end of the day, the bottom line is the ultimate arbiter in a for-profit business. But in public service, the text says it's a mess, and it's a mess in a good way.
How can a mess be good?
Yeah.
I like clarity. I like knowing if I'm winning or losing.
Because in the public sphere, you are accountable to so many different masters, all at the same time. You're accountable to statutory law, what the legislature told you to do. You're accountable to constitutional law citizens' rights. You're accountable to community values, to political norms, to professional standards, and to citizen interests.
That just sounds exhausting. It sounds like you can't please anyone.
It is incredibly difficult, but it's necessary friction. Imagine, for example, if a police department was only accountable to one single metric, say, the number of tickets issued per month. That would be simple accountability.
Oh, that would be an absolute disaster. They'd just be hiding in bushes, ticketing people for going 1 mile over the speed limit just to hit the number. They wouldn't care about actual public safety. They'd only care about the stat sheet.
Exactly. That's what happens with simple accountability. But complex accountability means they have to enforce the law, issue tickets, but also respect community values, not harassing people, uphold the Constitution, due process, and follow their own professional standards of policing.
So the complexity is actually a feature, not a bug.
It's the whole point. The text argues that simple numerical performance measures are inadequate on their own because they strip away this necessary democratic complexity.
So if a new city manager or a politician comes in and says, I'm going to simplify accountability and give you 3 key performance indicators, they are probably missing the entire point of public service.
They're very likely stripping away the democratic safeguards that make the system fair and just. We need that friction. That friction ensures we aren't trampling on people's rights just for the sake of being efficient.
All right, that's a powerful one. Tenet number 6, value people, not just productivity.
This seems obvious on its face, be nice to people, but the text connects internal management to external service in a really profound way.
This is the idea of managing through people rather than just, controlling them like cogs in a machine.
Right. The text argues that any system, no matter how well designed, will fail if it ignores the values and motivations of the employees working within it. But here is the critical connection it makes. If managers treat public employees with respect and dignity, those employees are far more likely to treat citizens with respect and dignity.
That makes total intuitive sense. If I'm a social caseworker and my boss is constantly breathing down my neck, treating me like a number, timing my bathroom breaks, and monitoring my keystrokes,
Then you are probably going to treat the person on the other side of the desk, the person applying for benefits, like a number, too.
I'm just passing that culture down the line.
You transmit the culture you live in. You simply cannot have a dehumanizing internal culture and expect to produce an empathetic external culture. It just doesn't work that way.
The text also touches on motivation here, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It makes a point of trying to debunk that old, tired myth of the lazy bureaucrat who just wants a safe job and a pension.
Yes, and the research overwhelmingly supports this. Most people who go into public service are driven by what we call public service motivation. They genuinely want to make a difference. They want to help people. They want to solve problems. They aren't just there for job security.
So the new public service model says managers should tap into that intrinsic motivation, that desire to serve, rather than just using carrots and sticks like you might in a sales-driven organization.
Exactly. Connect their work to the mission. Don't just try to bribe them with bonuses or threaten them with punishment.
Okay, bringing us home with the final one. Tenet number 7. Value citizenship and public service above entrepreneurship.
This is a direct shot across the bow at that whole government entrepreneur trend that was so popular.
Which is funny because entrepreneur is such a positive buzzword in our culture. Everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. It implies innovation, risk-taking, disrupting the status quo. Why is the text telling public managers not to be entrepreneurs?
It all comes down to a single question. Who is the owner? The text reminds us that public administrators are not the owners of the organization.
So who owns it?
The citizens own it. The administrator is a steward or a conservator of public resources and public trust.
That's a very, very different vibe. An entrepreneur, like a tech founder, risks their own capital. If Elon Musk wants to bet the farm on a new rocket design and it blows up on the launch pad, well, that's his money. That's his risk to take.
Exactly. But a public administrator, a city manager, or an agency head is risking public trust and public resources. Therefore, they cannot and should not act unilaterally. They can't just move fast and break things because the things that they are breaking might be people's civil rights or their clean drinking water.
So yeah, no disrupting the municipal water supply just to see if we can find a more efficient way to do it.
Please don't. The text's point is that because the risks are public, the decision-making process must also be public and collaborative. You have to consult. You can't just have a great idea in the shower and implement it on a Tuesday without talking to the people who actually own the place, the citizens.
So stewardship is about protecting the asset for the future, not gambling with it for a potential short-term gain.
That's the essence of it.
Wow. Okay, so to recap those 7 tenets, we are basically moving from a mindset of steering to serving, from focusing on individual self-interest to a shared public interest, from treating people as customers to engaging them as citizens, and from acting like an owner to being a steward.
That is the philosophical shift in a nutshell, and it's huge. It really transforms the job of a public administrator from being a kind of technician into being a guardian of the democratic process.
But now, I have to ask the practical question. We are a study group, yes, but most of us are also working or planning to work in these organizations. These are all very high ideals. But how do you actually manage your team on a Tuesday morning with this philosophy?
That is the perfect question, and it's the section 3 of our deep dive, practical application. How does this rubber actually meet the road? Because you're right, philosophy doesn't get the payroll processed or the trash picked up.
So let's start with something basic like goal setting. In a traditional top-down organization, the boss walks in on Monday and says, here are the goals for Q1. Get it done. How is it different in the new public service?
The text advocates for something it calls participative goal setting. The name says it all. Goals shouldn't just come from the top down. The process of setting them must be transparent and, well, participative.
And why is that? Is it just to make people feel included and happy? Or is there more functional reason for doing it that way?
It's much deeper than just feelings, though that's part of it.
Yeah.
The text argues that when you include your team and even stakeholders in the goal-setting process, it dramatically reduces destructive internal politics.
How so?
Because if everyone has already agreed on the goal, you spend less time fighting over turf and resources later on. It also naturally enhances motivation because people feel a sense of ownership over the goals they helped create.
And I guess it also models the very democratic values the agency is supposed to be upholding externally. You can't really be a dictator inside the office from 9 to 5 and then pretend to be a Democrat with the public at a town hall meeting.
Exactly. That consistency is critical.
Right.
If you treat your employees like subjects whose opinions don't matter, they will learn from you, and they won't treat citizens like citizens whose opinions do matter.
Okay, now let's talk about inclusion. The chapter brings up diversity again in this practical section.
It does, and it reframes the idea of diversity in a really important way. So often you see organizations treat diversity as, a legal requirement. We need to do this to avoid lawsuits, or maybe as a moral nice to have.
Right. It becomes a box-checking exercise. Okay, we have the requisite number of people from Group A and Group B. Our work here is done.
But the text argues that for the new public service, diversity isn't about compliance or even just morality. It's about competence.
Competence. That's a strong word. How is diversity a matter of competence?
Well, think about it. You fundamentally cannot serve a diverse public if your internal decision-making process excludes different worldviews. If your entire agency leadership is, say, 100% white men from the suburbs, you fundamentally cannot understand the lived experiences and the needs of an inner-city immigrant community or a rural farming community.
You have massive blind spots.
You have blind spots the size of Texas. You lack what the text calls cultural competence to even do the job effectively.
So inclusion isn't just being nice. It's a core management strategy to actually be effective at your primary mission.
It's a prerequisite for success. Without it, you are guaranteed to design policies that fail because you'll be designing solutions for problems that don't exist and completely ignoring the problems that do.
The text also lists out some very specific skills that this new kind of manager needs. And they aren't the typical skills you'd see on an MBA syllabus, like financial modeling or supply chain logistics.
No, not at all. The skills of the new public service manager are much more about process and people. Things like listening effectively. And I don't just mean waiting for your turn to talk. I mean deep, active listening, trying to understand the underlying values and interests of the person who's speaking.
It also says brokering alternatives.
Right. Notice it doesn't say imposing solutions. Your job isn't to force your solution on everyone. It's to find the solution that all the different groups can, at the very least, live with. It's negotiation. But the goal isn't to win. The goal is to find a durable consensus.
And the last one it lists is sharing power.
And that is, without a doubt, the hardest one for most people in leadership positions.
He really is. I mean, most managers spend their entire careers trying to accumulate power. This is my budget, this is my team, this is my authority. And the text is telling them the key to success is to give it away.
It's telling them that power in a democracy isn't a finite pie that you have to hoard your slice of. If you empower your employees and you empower the citizens you serve, you actually increase the capacity of the entire system to get things done. But it requires you to let go of control. You have to trust the process.
And that brings us right back full circle to that very first tenet. You have to stop trying to steer the ship all by yourself.
It requires a lot of humility. It requires a massive ego check at the door.
So bringing this all together as we wind down, we've gone on this journey from the government as a business model, the NPM, to this government as a democracy model, the NPS.
We have. And I think if there's one key takeaway, it's that in the NPS model, the process matters just as much as the substance. How we decide something is just as important as what we decide.
Because if the process is seen as fair and inclusive and transparent, people are much more likely to accept a difficult outcome. But if the process is secret and exclusive, even a good outcome will be viewed with suspicion and distrust.
Precisely. Trust is the essential currency of the new public service. And you can only earn that trust by doing things in the open, with the people, not to them.
The chapter ends on a really surprisingly emotional note, which I appreciated. It talks about the soul of the profession.
Yeah, it reflects on the fundamental question of why people enter this field in the first place. We touched on this earlier, but it's worth reiterating. People don't go into social work or city planning or environmental protection because they want to get rich. They aren't chasing stock options.
No. They do it because they want to go to sleep at night knowing that they made the world a little bit safer or cleaner or more just. They want to know they helped someone.
And the text's final message to managers is that they need to remember that tapping into that intrinsic public service motivation, that desire to serve, is the single most powerful management tool they have. If you can remind your team why their work matters to real people, you don't need to micromanage their every move.
It reminds me of that classic story of the janitor at NASA in the 1960s. President Kennedy is touring the facility, and he asks the janitor what he's doing, and the janitor replies, "Mr. President, I'm helping put a man on the moon."
That is the absolute essence of the new public service. Everyone, from the director to the janitor, understands how their work connects to the larger, noble mission. And that mission isn't profit. The mission is the public good.
So as we wrap up our study group for Chapter 14, and for the course, really, we always like to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought, something to chew on that takes this material one step further.
I've been thinking a lot about that tension we discussed at the very beginning, the tension between speed and dialogue.
Go on.
We live in a world that is completely addicted to speed. We want instant delivery, instant answers, instant gratification. The business model, the NPM, promises that speed. The democracy model, the new public service, promises dialogue, which is inherently, and sometimes painfully, slow.
Democracy is messy. It's slow. It involves endless meetings and disagreements and compromises. It's not efficient.
So the question for everyone listening is this. If efficiency requires quick, decisive, top-down action, but democracy requires slow, deliberative, bottom-up dialogue, are we as a society willing to accept a slower government if it means a more just and legitimate one? Or are we too addicted to the speed of the marketplace to ever be true citizens?
That is a tough question. I think we all say we want justice and democracy, but we also really, really hate waiting in line.
That is the conflict we all have to live with. And the job of the public administrator, according to this chapter, is to stand right in the middle of that conflict and navigate it every single day.
Well, on that very deep note, thank you for joining our study group. It's been a great semester. Make sure to check the syllabus for any final announcements.
See you then.
Class dismissed.